We're at the panel of how to thrive, how to keep women thriving in the workplace. And before we start, I'd just love to do a quick show of hands for women in the audience who are actually looking to re-enter the workforce. Okay, so, oh, everybody, wow, that's really relevant. And how many are actually currently in the workforce? Okay, so very, very relevant. Hopefully, this morning's conversation will be. Um, we'll actually start. I thought it is interesting to just put a little bit of context of where we are today. In India, there's the latest, I think, Catalyst survey of 2017 shows 28.5% of Indian women are currently engaged in the workforce, and 82% of men. So just flip the numbers, right? 28% of women and 82% of men. I think the number's even lower for the urban Indian workforce. So I think there's almost a 5 to 10 percentage difference points between rural women workforce and urban India women workforce. And there was a very interesting study done by McKinsey and Catalyst, I think in 2015, which said that if we increase that labor force participation for women by 10 percentage points, it would add $700 billion to the Indian GDP by 2025. So just to put it in perspective, that would add 1.4% to our GDP as a national country's wealth, just by adding 10% more women into the workforce. So it's really exciting to see all of you here, to see that this is something that's close to everybody's heart, and just to put a few numbers behind it to give it some perspective. So we'll start. And I think the first question for the morning is, I'd love to know about a little bit more about each of your companies and sort of specific policies and features that they have in place to make sure women thrive in the workforce. And if there's anything that is kind of different, if you're saying, okay, Mondelez does something differently or Accenture does something differently, please do highlight it. Should we start with you, Jeremy?
Sure, sure. So, I mean, diversity is supremely important for most companies these days, definitely for us. And what we decided to do was raise the stakes for ourselves. So we went public saying that we'll be 50-50 in terms of gender mix by 2025, right? And not only does that raise the stakes for ourselves, but we also come from a philosophy that what gets measured gets done. So it's a nice ambitious goal to work towards. From a policy standpoint, I think most leading companies have a lot of policies related to flexibility um, and safety, which I think form the foundation for additional policies that help people thrive or women thrive in the workplace, right? Especially for us, where I think on any given day, probably 20,000 women would be commuting in the night in our cabs. Safety is supremely important as a big consideration for families back home in India to allow their daughters, daughter-in-laws, wives, etc., to work, and also for the women themselves to feel comfortable working in a night shift. But then, as we think of mentoring and building future leaders, because that's another goal for us, we want to have 25% of our senior most leaders in the organization, we want 25% of them to be women. And there are multiple mentorship programs, but to my mind, one that stands out is called the Triple R, where we make sure that our women who are high potential future leaders are tagged to the right client, because we're a company which services or supports clients. So they tag to a client who can challenge them. They tag to a role which gives them learnings and gives them a path to growth. And they tag to a right mentor come sponsor who can really coach them and advocate their cause. And that's yielding good results because in the last cycle, around one third of our promotions to the senior most level in our organization were women.
You want to go next? Is this working? Okay, fantastic. So maybe two, three statistics, and then we'll talk about perhaps what's different. I like the way he said there's a hygiene on flexibility and so on and so forth. So we won't spend time on that. So country leadership team, 30% women. Okay, so we have 30% of our country leaders as women. The largest chocolate factory in Asia for us is in a place called Sri City. 50% of the workforce is women. We're not 50% overall women. Okay, so I'm obviously choosing statistics. Okay, so 50% of the shop floor is women, and I think it has changed the way the villages around the factory look at education for a girl child. And that's a story I'm very proud of. So I mean, that's another statistic. And again, ahead of industry in terms of. So I used to work with a telecom company till I joined Mondelez. 3 years ago. And I must say, the way we use technology at Mondelez far exceeds what I've ever seen in any of my consulting life or telecom life. In terms of today, I don't need my women to come to work if they need to work from anywhere because of simple technology is again something that we utilize. So those were 3 statistics. What do we have different? Perhaps I think again, 2-3 things that perhaps I can touch upon and then we can delve deeper basis where the interest is. One is we're anal about inclusion and diversity. It's just not diversity because there's no point getting diversity in if you're not inclusive, So we look at it as I and D and not D and I. So we need to be inclusive and diverse. 2, the why of diversity is a big deal for us, I mean, we don't want to increase diversity because we want to look nice on a slate which says this percentage women. But actually, it is one of the ways for us to get thought diversity on the table as we take our products to the consumers. So how do we get a microcosm of the society we serve onto the board is really the why. And I think we spend quite some time ensuring that people across levels understand the why. Because usually the leaders get it, and people who want to, see themselves inside get it. But how do we ensure that at different layers of the organization, there's a good understanding of the why so that then the actions follow? Okay, so a lot of time spent in the why. And 3, all our policies are gender agnostic. So when we say, and I was joking to Farah, we could well nice say restart him, because starting with our sabbatical policy, work from home policy, parental leave, if I have a male, and we have a few cases of men who've adopted kids, who want parental leave, just like a woman who wants parental leave, or if I have, a person who's a male in the workforce who has aging parents, and wants to take care of aging parents and therefore wants to take a couple of months off, we encourage it because we feel through that and through a little action on our policy, we are going to actually change that fabric of society which says caring is equal to woman, break is equal to woman, child care is equal to woman. No. We are both parents, and I think that's really, and I must say the idea for this did not come from where it came from, and I'm very proud. From some of the men who were on the floor, who actually said, hey, why are these exciting policies only for women? Even we want to kind of, be equal partners. So perhaps those are 2-3 things perhaps that are a little different, but yeah.
So at the Aditya Birla Group, we believe in living a life fully and holistically. So whether it's for men or for women, we believe you need to have a life and you need to have work. And with that as our base ethos, we've always been very women friendly, though not really known outside. We don't brand ourselves or anything. Understate brand is the way we are for everything, and on this subject also we've stayed in that space. Second, we believe that in remote locations it would be difficult to find employment for a couple. So we used to get women there, and then when they got married, they said, "Oh, now we need to move." Or when gentlemen began to get married, they said, "But now my spouse wants to work." So we've been addressing that because we have a pan-India presence in India, and then we have, of course, operations outside India, where we have the good 30%, 40% of women. In India, in our services businesses and others, we have very significant population. We've been over the last few years, apart from ensuring that all the hygiene policies are in place, they were always there, but in terms of calling it out, because people assume that they are not there. So we've had to call out, whether it's the safety policy, whether it's a simple thing like washrooms. A lot of businesses, showrooms, etc., not just us, it's across the industries, cut short on washrooms, both for men and women. But it's the women who have a greater problem, because men can still go and share the washroom elsewhere. But starting from as base as that, we put travel policies. So when you travel, and we have remote locations. So you're not supposed to travel at night because you may be the only one traveling. We have when you travel at work during when you're expecting, yes, you can upgrade the travel. Post maternity, you can take the child and a caregiver so that you are you're not missing out on your child versus the work. So we don't want people to have to make an or choice. We are very clear on that. We want it to be the Hindi or and not the English or in that space. So that's our base philosophy. The women who work with us feel highly respected professionally. Their work counts. They feel they're treated equal, and they experience it. And we've done surveys, and they say yes, we feel very good in the overall. We've done a lot of hygiene checks on overall policies, which says they are equally treated, and sometimes even better treated in terms of performance, rewards, career options, etc. Having done a lot of this over 10 years, we started to figure out why were the numbers not growing. We were hiring numbers, but it was not. So we figured that there is, most women are first generation workforce. So when they encounter their first moments of truth at home, or what Sandra in that Lenin speaks about, women check out before they really need to check out. So we experience some of that. So we put in programs which we call onus, which is about career intentionality, and we start that when you are about 2 years in the workforce, to say, okay, why are you at work? What do you want to achieve out of work? And therefore, how will you sort yourself out in various conversations with yourself first, and then with the rest of the family and others. So it's been very well received in the overall space, because I believe, and a lot of research says that it's your own self-confidence that is important. And once you have that, you find your ways. I mean, I believe all women work, whether they work at work, whether they are in paid jobs or unpaid jobs. All of us, all of you, everybody is working. It's always nice to be paid for it, and that's the difference.
I'm going to ask a quick follow-up question on onus. It's very interesting. Do all your women in the workforce, about 2 years, I mean, you're in the office or whatever, 2 years in, get this kind of counseling, or how does it work?
So it's a 2-day program. It's
Yeah.
a proper training workshop. So it's offered to all our management cadre women.
Yeah.
And but women have to come out for a day to receive it, and women are very reluctant in that space to invest that kind of time.
Yeah.
As my colleagues are here, and they say those who come rave about it.
Yeah.
But getting them in always is a way. So we've been running it for about 4 years. We've got about 800 women in who've done it.
Yeah.
But we still have about there's always another 1,000 to go.
Yeah. But you hit a very key nail on the head when you say that the moment of truth comes, when you have your children or you have your marriage, and when things get tough, because through your 20s, you've come in on an equal footing with the other gender, and you're usually at low levels of management, equal split in terms of gender, and then you see that leaky pyramid as you go up. So if someone actually tells you, 2 years in, what are you doing and how are you thinking about it, it is quite revolutionary. So I have not heard about this of Aditya Birla, so I just wanted to highlight that. I've not seen it in most organizations where they're helping women to think very early on about leaning in, like you said, Sheryl Sandberg, instead of leaning out early on, right?
I believe in it.
Very, very good. Yeah.
So, thank you. Yeah. So
Rohit?
let me start with why we do something before getting into what specifically we do well. Diversity, inclusion, diversity is not new for us, because our company, basically what they do is they ship goods from A to B. I come from the business, probably the only unique one here, but let me give you a business perspective. And the reason I'm giving this perspective is because anything that is good for the business will always be sustainable in the long run. And therefore it has to be good for the business, it has to make economic sense. Thanks for throwing some economic statistics, but let me tell you, we are a beneficiary whenever everybody has a diverse workforce. You have more diverse workforce, economy does well, trade grows. And when we are shipping goods from A to B, so when trade grows, we hugely benefit from it, right? So anybody here is actually helping me or our business do well. Thank you for that. We have been doing this for a long time. This is not new to us. We have been doing this, and let me give you some statistics. If I talk about my business unit, which is across 5 locations, 3 different countries, 12,000 people, we have 42% women workforce. In fact, in some places, I actually have a reverse problem. We have more women than men, and we got to be able to balance both. We have a challenge, however. In India, we have 31%, and at leadership levels, it's lower. And then that's also where I'm maybe weaving the story and saying, okay, what do we do differently? Hygiene factors, giving a conducive environment, and all is a given. Flexi timings, work from home, policies, daycare now is mandated by law, a certain level of maternity is mandated by law. All that is given, but what's different? Maybe 3 points I'll touch upon. Point number 1, I think we actually take up a lion's share of daycare costs. So if you talk about someone wanting to come back to work, we are taking a big share of that cost. We also want employee to contribute because we want them to value, but otherwise we are taking the bigger share. Then because we have a lower percentage at leadership levels, we are also always looking for full-time employment. We are always looking for people at leadership level, middle level and top level management. That's what we are looking at. And there we have interventions. So in recruitment, we have interventions. You can take an example of us participating in a program like this. And Mr. Harish was actually speaking about his wife working in our company. So I can start with that. Then I think second point, we talk about interventions to groom leaders. We have specific intervention for women leadership at mid-level management and at senior level management. So this is where we are being very, very deliberate, because we need to have more workforce at those levels. And that's also one of the key reasons why we are here. Like I said, it makes a lot of business sense for us. Any company that wants to innovate and transform, and that's the journey we are going through. We want to innovate, we want to transform, and we want people who can help us through that change. And it's a big change, and therefore we are basically here looking for candidates who can help us.
Interesting. We started this. We started the conversation talking about your companies and things that are noteworthy that your companies do. I'd like to move it to a little more personal level right now, and maybe get your stories personally on why you think it is important for you to retain women in the workforce, and either through your personal journey or just what you've seen through your colleagues. What are the biggest obstacles? And Rohit, I want to start with you, because you said that there's 31% women for India, and at the senior management levels that's even less. You're obviously a company that's trying to do a lot to retain women. In some of your South Asia Pacific countries, you're at 80% women, you said. So what do you think is the obstacle? Why do they leave? Why don't they go up the chain?
I would again say that a part of it is the kind of environment we give them. So in fact, I would say we don't lose more women than we lose men. Let me start with that. But do we attract the same number? That's a challenge. So I think for me it's attracting and not necessarily a challenge with losing. And it becomes challenge at management levels also because probably women take actually that leadership role at home, and therefore they cannot take as many leadership positions. And I think that's what we want to change, where we are basically saying we commit to a conducive environment even at leadership levels to ensure we can actually retain and attract more talent at leadership levels. That again helps us, because imagine if your big workforce is women employees, then you also need leaders who can look at that mindset and influence change. So we want influencers who can influence change with our bigger population, and that's why it's important for us.
So I think women is 50% of educated workforce. So it's very simple that they need to be working. So there shouldn't be any barriers. I personally don't believe that you have to come into a corporate only to work, but working is important. And gainfully employed is important. Whether you run your business, whether you run your, these days with so many people out at work, even the good ghar ka khana is so important and so elusive that if somebody simply supplies that, they can make a killing out of it. Get your house clean, doing party, organizing a party, a kids party. I mean, I actually need a full housewife at home behind me to run my house. That's a job, and I will be happy and willing to pay any amount of money for it. And you ask any of our other leaders at work, almost every leader will say, you know what, I need a housewife behind me, or I need a house master.
This is an interesting new profession you're starting up. I think it's got a lot of potential, actually.
Yeah. So being happy and being working, whether it's in a startup, your self startup, that's what it is. And organizations benefit from the emotional maturity, from the creative ideas, from a different way of looking at things or working, So improvise, I think, is a great quality that we women bring to the work. Resilience is another, multitasking is a third. And I think modern organizations in this, as they in corporate jargon called the VUCA world, the very volatile world, need a lot more, here and now, different things. Teaming together, women, when they come together, they can really team well together, are important things. So we just, working is important, and we must get everybody working. Like
So I might slightly disagree there. I think it's really important also for people, for the ones that say this is not for me, and the ones who leave and who choose their home or building the hearth and focusing on their children, is also working.
Yes,
right?
that's what
And
I'm saying. It's working.
And
so take it as
we
work.
are working no matter what. I think women are working no
Yeah,
matter
but-
what. But there's a lot of people who did feel that they don't feel fulfilled necessarily at work, and they didn't want to, and they took a step back, and that's okay, right? I think the big question we have is, how are we really pushing the ones that do want to return? How do we get them in and keep them in there?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a two-way challenge in my view.
Maybe I'll switch gears a little bit over here, and follow-up question on Rohit and Preeti's comments is, what do you think society and institutions need to change to help retain the women? Because corporates do, like all of you all mentioned, a lot of hygiene factors, flexibility, maternity leave, senior management is bought into it. What do you think institutions can do and society needs to change to keep women in?
No, I think you've hit it at the core, as I see it, because I think a lot of what organizations are doing is also to enable, or at least organizations, I spoke about our gender neutral policy, we're trying to gradually inch at society, but if we could start at home, if we could start then at schools, and again, I don't know if there are any educators here other than moms who are educators or fathers who are educators, but any from the education industry, teachers, thank you. I think folks like you have such a big role to play in how people think. And I don't know, so I was very inspired. I was reading this book last week. It's called Like a Girl. Okay, it actually is a book full of examples of girls who are astronauts, who are radiologists, and and I love the MC who said, okay, look, it's not about are you going to go and become Miss India tomorrow, or are you going to be an air hostess? You could be the pilot, you could be the the cardiologist, you could be the radiologist, you could be the politician, you could be anything. I think early on, exposing that to a girl as much as we expose that to a guy, encouraging the girl to climb the tree and jump off as much as we encourage the, so I have a son, he helps me in the kitchen, and I'm pretty proud of that, I want to be sure he's able to make his own tea. I'm not doing it for social good, I'm doing it for his own good. But I'm hoping that, and I love the way, Preeti, you said that, perhaps the challenge happens because many of this generation of working women were perhaps the first generation, and as the second generation comes, it kind of gets easier and easier. So that's one. So that's from what education can do or society can do. I think it's very important not to make either career women or homemakers sexy, both are sexy enough, and we need to be able to respect both those, and cherish the choices that we are making, as long as those choices are our choices. So perhaps there are 2, 3 call outs I have, and my mind is still on barriers, you know. I think there's some barriers we create in our own heads, okay? The first barrier we create in our own head is I got to be the most popular woman in my family and a larger family ecosystem. So I'll do what the broader that ecosystem expects out of me and not what I want, you know, and I sometimes hesitate to, you know, state that up, you know. I think being comfortable stating this is my preference is perhaps the first step, and it starts there. The second one I very strongly feel about is once you're in the organization, a lot of us have, you know, even when we are inside an organization working, we feel very comfortable putting in the work hours. We still feel it is our primary responsibility to then also cook, you know, that, or we take it very literally in life, you know, so I need to do the and at work and cook and take care of my, parent teacher meeting, and I need to be perhaps choiceful on do I do that networking lunch? Do I spend a Saturday engaging women in a panel, or do I rather spend it at home, you know? I think feeling a little less guilty, you know, is such a big deal, you know, because I think the years and decades of the conditioning of saying, look, you need to be that primary caregiver, having the conversations of co-opting a larger ecosystem, you know, who can be our partners in life, you know, and not just partners in, one part of life is such a big deal, you know. And therefore, whether it's the, a full-time housemaid at work, you know, or is it a spouse who is equally interested in educating the child, or parents, or, you know, looking at outsourcing, you know, like we outsource at work. And also being comfortable to say, these are investments I make. I need to make investments in not just working at my computer, but also going and meeting industry colleagues, because I may get more ideas there, you know. Feeling pretty bindas about saying, look, I kind of feel I want to give back, because I want to ensure that as much as I struggled, 20 women I connect with struggle 1/100th of what I did, you know. And I think as we advocate for each other, and not just women for women, but humans to humans, and men for women and women for men as well, it can create a wave of even more equity and equality. And those are perhaps 3, 4 thoughts there.
Yeah. And if I split this up into the demand side and the supply side, right? I think from a demand side, corporates in India made significant progress in the last decade in just creating that environment of awareness, inclusion, support, which would make any workplace a great place to work for women or men, right? So I think tremendous progress there. Potentially, there's still some space in our country to do more policies that encourage men to spend time supporting the family. So that's, I think, one area to explore further. But I think the big challenge is really on the supply side, because your graduate pool is 50% women, but your workforce has only, as you said, 28% women. And I think that's where forums such as these, where we provoke the dialogue and provoke the thought and discussions around potential returning mothers or returning women, and encourage them to have that dialogue back home as well and make the best decisions for themselves individually, which could be in some cases, I love what I'm doing at home, I'll stay there. In some cases, I want to potentially do a part-time job. In some cases, I just want to come back to the workforce and I need help at home to support my responsibilities as a parent. So I think we need to do a lot more of that. This is a step in that direction. I think the next 5 years, we just need to accelerate tempo on that front.
One example I do want to share, and for many of you who are from the corporate side here. So one of the things Mondelez is making it a habit of is when we have men as active members, sometimes handling parenting, sometimes sitting, we make sure we spread the word and we celebrate that, so I mean, I have, so we have a new leader who's joined us to head our gum candy powdered beverages, which is Tang and Bonvita and all that stuff. So he has a working wife who works with another FMCG company, and they have 2 kids. So there are days he goes to pick up the kids, and there are days she goes to pick up the kids, and I think that's something we talk about in our Career Conversations Week, so that it inspires, the women to have those conversations back home, and it also inspires the men to see how cool that can be, and that's perhaps a small gesture that we again do to celebrate some of these partnerships.
So on the society front, I have a request of all moms here. Uh, Early on, when my husband is quite okay in this equal responsibility piece. So he agreed to drop our son to the bus stop, and after 2 days, he comes back and he says, "I'm not going anymore." I said, "What happened?" He says, there's all of these moms, they make a cluster of themselves and they are chit-chatting, and I'm left alone. He went to school, it was the same. So everywhere there is this women coterie, and they leave the single or the two or the three men alone when you go for a parent-teacher meeting or anything in that space. And if guys come shopping for vegetables or they are in the kitchen, we all giggle and ooh, wow, all of that. So we shoo them and shove them away even when they want to do something. So, encouraging them, encouraging your spouse, encouraging your kids, your brothers, your father also is very important in that side, because when people see multiple generations doing the things and it's okay to do that, I think it's very important when the whole family does work. And I've been experimenting on this on the home front quite a bit in that space. So, early on when we used to go home, my husband would say, "Okay, so what's for dinner?" I said, "Well, dinner." He said, "What's for dinner?" I said, "Well, we are going home together. I don't know." We figure out at the table what is for dinner. But it takes a while to get the guilt off, but we had to work on it. I request social structure, please provide equal opportunity for men to do all the things that you do and be comfortable with it.
And the simplest way to probably do that is just have a gender neutral lens, right? Quite often we just view people with a unconscious bias based on gender, and we just have to look at people as individuals and not as men first, women first. They are all individuals first.
Well, absolutely, and that's at the root of, therefore, that Mondelez policy, because we realized that as we spoke with more and more of our workforce, we realized that the issue is because we have maternity leave, sabbatical for women. We said no, parental leave, and let's kind of just encourage. I don't think we've changed the universe, but we've made some
Yeah.
early starts there. Yeah.
I think
Can I actually switch
Yeah,
gears? And
sure.
we know that most of this audience is actually looking for restarting and returning to the workforce. Can you think of your top 2 to 3 tips that you would give them in terms from a work perspective? What you guys are looking for when you are interviewing and recruiting women who are trying to return to the workforce?
Yeah, I think for us, we are definitely looking for people who may have taken a break, but we don't see that as negative in any sense. So we are looking for people who genuinely want to restart a career and not just have a job. So I want to look at people who have the fire in their belly.
And your HR team is fully on board with
Absolutely,
that.
absolutely.
Sometimes that big gap in the resume, when they say, "But what happened for these 4 years?"
No, we are not. I mean, and actually, if I have to be honest about it, it's the HR team that has coached us about this, right? So let me give them credit, and they're sitting right here, and that's great, right? That's fantastic. That's the first thing. And the second thing, like I said, right, because we are so specifically short on leadership levels, we are so open about saying that that we need people at leadership level, and therefore we are talking about people who have that high growth potential and who have that willingness to take charge. Let me substantiate that by one more thing. I think we genuinely believe in work-life balance. It's not something on paper. And I think a lot of things were spoken about here. We are a Danish-based company, a Denmark-based company, right? And there, I've lived there for 2 years, and I can tell you, people run out of the office at 4:30 or 5 o'clock because the daycare is closing. So either the father or the mother has to reach there. And there's always, okay, today the mother is in stress, so the father reaches there, and tomorrow the father is in stress, so the mother reaches there. But one of them, by hook or crook, will get there. And that's something that's very acceptable in the society, and that's not that acceptable in India. It's working late is a culture, and that also has to change. So just also going back to the first point, right? That also has to change. We should not stereotype working long means working better, and that is definitely something that I would leave this forum saying, okay, it's fine. We balance it out. I mean, there are days where I am leaving office and then we're logging from home if I have fire in the office. So those are things I could talk about.
Preeti, would you
So
like
we
to
look for career intentionality and lack of baggage. You know, a lot of people say, yeah, you know, I left, I had to, you enjoy what you did, come back. I mean, it doesn't matter how many years of experience you have, you'll get a role commensurate with your competence, you'll get a role commensurate with your attitude and aptitude, and you'll grow. But if you, in fact, we've recently had people, you know, SP Jain has done a program, an executive MBA only aimed for women who want to come back to work. And I think it's an excellent idea because you get a year of the bridge of academic rigor and you know what is at work. So when you come to work, the issues are very different. You know, it's like if somebody comes into your kitchen, you're lost. Similarly, the corporate world and its jargon work is a little different. You have to get used to it in that space. So, from the tips point of view, I think doing a course, ensuring what you want, and saying, "Oh, I'm looking for a job," doesn't help. Be clear. Be specific about what functional areas you are good at, and therefore what kind of roles you'd like. That homework is important. Also, how are you going to manage yourself is an important one to showcase because everybody wants uh, people to stay, not say, you know, "But I came, I made a mistake a week later, I don't think I can do it, I'm going back." It's not. Yes, a fair trial is and a fair mistake is okay, but otherwise 80% of the women should make it in that sense, you know, otherwise guys will have a bad experience.
Okay, so maybe 4 tips. I would start off by saying one, let's be very clear. You know, if you're a dentist wanting to be a salesperson tomorrow suddenly, no. So I think a very good self-awareness of what do you want, how much do you want, and choices are fine. You know, I mean, I love the way, you know, Farah, you put it. Some of us want to be back for a couple of hours. Some of us want to do try out on projects. Some of us want to come whole hog. So at Mondelez, we don't differentiate. If you're applying, we're assuming your game and you're coming in, you know. But I think the first tip really is know what you want and don't be, second tip is don't be shy of asking what you want, you know. The other sometimes myth in our head is a company would not take me if I say, oh, but I need to leave at 4, you know. Oh, you know, I think I'll be able to, I think it's a fantastic time for women who want to come back, you know. And I'm not going to harp on the men part right now and the gender neutrality right now. But for women who want to come back, it's pretty interesting because there's almost like a wave, okay, of, you know, of regulation, of industry wanting to embrace that. I think the why is more and more clear. So I think you have it all going for you, but don't be hesitant to put your foot forward, but ask what you want in return pretty clearly. So I think that's the second thing that I would suggest. The third thing I would suggest is know that when you step in, what would it take? You know, and if that means you need to have conversations with others in the role, figure out, so you may have gone off from your career when you were a salesperson. It's okay to come back and do something else if you feel you don't have it in you to travel out and, you know, but to come back and say, hey, I will come, but I'm not going to be moving out of my corporate office is not fair for the organization as well, you know. And therefore my third tip is to say, be very choiceful on which roles you want to come back to and express it upfront so that there is no frustration for you or the organization a little down the line. And fourth, I maintain, stop that nonsense on guilt. Okay, once we've decided we got to do it, get everyone to partner with you on that journey. You know, create partnerships, outsource some stuff, get family to partner, friends to partner, organization to partner. And trust me, the organization is dying to partner if only you take a step. You know, and I know there are many steps the organization takes. Please leverage some of those, build your awareness, and just be yourself, you know, and be happy with, you know, whatever choices you make. So I said 4, but I gave 5. Sorry.
Look, I'll be quick so we leave some time for interaction, right? I think some great points made. The only additional thing I'd add is you might not get success in the first instance of applying, right? And don't let that discourage you. Unfortunately, there'll still be some organizations which are looking for cookie cutter fits for the specific roles. But I'd encourage you to leverage on the resilience and patience which you have built as a mother and keep trying till you get that dream job for yourself.
and I don't know if I'm allowed to give tips, but I'll add one there, was, there it takes a village, right? It takes a village to run a house and run a family and have children. And I think sometimes, at least in my personal opinion, I thought nobody could do it the way I did it. So then it was hard to let go. But when you did, and my mother, I live next door to my mother, and she teaches my daughter Hindi because I'm at work all day and I don't have time to do Hindi homework lessons. And maybe it's not the way I would do it, but I've had to let go. And the same way, my husband takes her to school every day, and I would like to be there, but I don't have time, and I'm running to the office. But I've had to lean on them, and it's worked out, and everybody rises to the occasion. Dada, dadi, nana, nani, cousins, mamu, mami, the whole village is helping out. So maybe if we can trust. So I guess my tip was trust that it will work out with the extended village. So we have 5 minutes for one last question. We'll open it up to questions from you. But the theme for Restart Her has been difficult conversations, as you guys saw the video. Some of you had anecdotes to share about difficult conversations either you've had with a woman who's interviewing, or you've seen colleagues have, or you've experienced or heard of. We'd love to hear just an anecdote of these difficult conversations and what your advice was to deal with it. And Mahalakshmi, I know you had one particular one that you wanted to share, so let's start with you, and then we'll hear from everybody.
No, I think so. My difficult conversation is a contra example, because I do believe in equal responsibility as much as we ask for stuff as women with a balance of life that we want to kind of put in place. So I think the difficult conversation for me was actually to speak to one of my team members who was a very active mom, okay, who was actually not performing, and I'm kind of giving a contra example just to kind of drive that point home. Just because you're a woman, don't, as much as you have expectations of the organization, remember that the organization has expectations of you. It dreads to have that conversation with you because, they don't want that black mark saying, oh, they were not understanding of this woman, who has broader requirements. But the conversation actually was to sit her down and say, dude, if 3 days out of 5 you're going to be spending at the school, when are you working, and do you want to get that village to kind of partner with you? Not an easy conversation for me. I hate to confront, but I had to do that, and it was difficult for me. But I realized that if I did not set that example, managers, male and female in other functions, are going to actually hesitate because they'll say, hey, why would I take a punt on this returning woman? Practically because maybe our productivity will fall, for all the statistics that you're showing. But to actually have a transparent conversation to say, look, with great power comes great responsibility. No, but but with some of these privileges comes that importance of saying, let's have a thing of saying, I'm going to go and do this, but I'm going to lean in and make up by, maybe I'll just work out of home today, but ensure that work gets met. Or I'm going to ensure that things don't fall off the crack, but I'm going to ask one of my friends to step in, who's my peer. And one day when he, struggles at something, I'll step in. Ensuring that the ball doesn't fall is an accountability. And the example I wanted to share was about, us having to call that out to ensure that, all of the men and women on the workforce understood that responsibility. That's a workforce example.
Very interesting. Yeah, it is responsibility that comes with it. Rohit, do you want to share? I remember you said something as well.
Yeah, I think I can share our company being so international, spread across 130 odd countries. The imminent part of the job is to travel, and that's made clear upfront. And it's not like we have to travel every day or every other day. But I was in a situation where one of the employees decided was coming and telling us she cannot travel because she has responsibilities at home that otherwise will be challenged. And I think I had to have a very difficult conversation here, maybe trying to explain that it being a part of the job, that's probably a must do here. And also the fact that when your whole household enjoys the benefits of your job, they should also take responsibilities that are associated and coming with the job. So we think I am doing this job, but no, I mean the whole ecosystem is doing it, right? We spoke about everybody helping us out. Yes, I get to go and work because there is someone supporting me, and therefore I have to go and travel and someone has to support me because the benefit of my job is to the whole household and not to me alone. And I think that was a conversation we had to have, which I think went positive finally.
Did she end up traveling?
Yes.
Great. Preeti, would you like to share?
So, you know, women who work are normally top performers because when they come in, so they are very competitive, they love it. And when their performance falls for whatever reason, because they have to, they can't be super women everywhere, so either their health suffers, something suffers, they take it very, very personally and badly. And then they say, okay, it's quits. Because if I can't be a top performer, then I'd rather not do the job at all. So getting them to say, look, you know, there's a time when you are a top performer, and there's another time when you need to be a little more even and be an okay performer, and you'll get another time to be a top performer, is I think among the most difficult conversations to have and get women to reconcile to it when they are at work.
Jeremy, anything you want to add?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have this high-performing mom in my team who's a mom for two. She has two sons, and quite often our conversations around some of the underlying guilt she feels for some reason around not spending enough time with her kids at home. And the difficult conversation for me was actually entering a bit of a personal space to try and understand how much of that parental responsibility is being shared by the spouse, and to what extent would he, for example, be experiencing that guilt. But it's a difficult conversation, but I think it's important because I think each of us individually need to start provoking dialogue in that fashion so that we have a society where parental responsibilities are better and more equally, maybe not equally owned, but owned because of individual choice and not because of gender stereotype.
But thank you all for sharing those. I hope it was useful, the sort of difficult conversations, very real examples, I think, that most of us have gone through or people close to us have gone through. So thank you for that. That wraps up our formal questions. So we definitely have time to take questions from the audience, and we'd love to hear from you. So if anyone has a question.
Hi, I'm Sharmila. So it's really very nice to know that the organizations have been very benevolent, in terms of the policies for women who are trying to come back. And it's indeed a pleasure to know that. Now, I have a very interesting question here. And since we are talking about thriving in the workplace, right? So we have been working before, handling powerful positions, but yes, we took a break for, say, about 3 years. And when you're back into the workplace, you have somebody who's much younger to you, who's now at a powerful position. So it brings you to an interesting emotional handling that, I was already there, I was driving a team, I have been powerful enough, and now what? So I would really love to know your thoughts on this. How do you look at this?
I mean, I can take a part of it because to be very honest, I think I have been lucky enough to be in senior roles at a much younger age than most of the other colleagues around me have been. So irrespective of a break, I have been in the other situation that you spoke about, and for me, age has absolutely nothing to do with maturity. It has absolutely nothing to do with competence or capability. Respect comes from what you are able to deliver, no matter which position that you are in. And yes, maybe you took a break and you came back, but if you have the potential, you can earn that respect faster and the position faster. So for me, it's about not feeling that I'm entitled for it, but earning it basis the respect that you gain from people around you. And I don't think if a person has potential, he will take that long to do that. It doesn't matter what age a person is at.
So are the organizations knowing that the person is optimally qualified, to be at a certain position? If I held a AVP position when I left the job, am I going back at an AVP position, or the organization is thinking about, a step down or a step up because of the career gap?
We don't try to take advantage of these situations. Let me be very, very clear about that, right? Absolutely not. I think if you have the potential, you get the job.
I mean, the only thing I add to that is focus on the value you can create in every role versus looking at the designation and looking at the person who you're reporting into is younger or older than you, right? And as long as you're adding value in the role, you'll feel fulfilled, and then you'll see success over a period of time.
You know, in today's society, on one hand, we talk about startups, we talk about everybody wanting to get so levels, designation, years of experience, all of that is expected to cease to matter. Okay, it is competence that really drives. So one should look at whether for your current competence, not past competence, you have the right role. Sometimes you may start a shade lower because the organization is not clear about what you really know and what are you currently up to date, but very soon you can pick up and do that. And like Rohit said, most of us who worked long, uh, there's always a chance and there is time when somebody younger will be senior to you and you will be reporting to a peer, or some of that will happen, and often your team members will be senior, equal, all of that. So maintaining that respect in the workplace is important. It has nothing to do with restarting. It's a regular organization protocol and practice.
Okay, I have a question. I have 7 years of experience. Suppose that I have been on a break for 3 years, but during that time, I upskilled myself through new technology. So right now, I'm going to companies for interviews. So they've been calling me an experienced fresher. So
That's nice. That's a nice term.
so I really feel that is it like that I have to compromise on my salary or my expectation because I am trying to upskill myself, which is obviously a little different than what I was doing in my past experiences. Because see, I cannot prove into a new skill. I don't have nothing to showcase on the new skill that I've recently acquired. And the term "their experienced fresher" sounds literally a fresher to me.
So I like to share a personal story here. I've been working through my 28 years, but at the end of 5 years of experience, I went to a consulting organization, one of India's leading HR consulting organizations, and they said, you know what you know, because you've been working in companies, you don't know any consulting. So what you know we can't use, and what we need you don't have. So for us, you're as good as a fresher. Okay, so even after having worked for 5 years, that's what they actually had to say, and they said that's the way we value you. After that, it's what you grow, how you grow, and I did it. And it was a very useful piece. So I think an experienced fresher is with no baggage whatsoever, and I think it offers you a complete uh, runway to work as you would like, with no performance pressure.
But I would also add, maybe it doesn't have much to do with a break. Now imagine I don't come from HR. If I get trained and I go for an MBA in HR and I come in the job, will I get their jobs? Probably not. I have experience. I'm going to be the experienced fresher in HR because I don't have the hands-on experience to deal with the situations they have dealt with. So I don't think it is anything to do with a break here. I think it's just to do with the fact that you are looking for a certain field in which you don't have experience. Yes, you have worked, but I cannot count that experience to the job you are applying. Similar to the example I gave you on HR.
May I build on this? I think sometimes there are a lot of stories we tell ourselves, and there are some stories we talk to ourselves, but we don't go and talk about it. Okay, I don't know your exact situation. I don't know if your certification was deeply linked to bettering your existing skill, or was it completely disjointed. If it was deeply linked, it's a great, see the title of whether they call you experienced fresher or what doesn't matter. But if you're comfortable, instead of feeling pathetic about it, picking up a conversation, to say, look, here is the experience I bring on the table relevant to your role. Here is what my certification adds to it. So therefore, I need to get delta extra. That conversation is so important, okay? Sometimes we feel so frustrated that, we are just like not talking to the right person, but talking to almost the whole universe other than that right person, So my encouragement would be to have that conversation. And of course, beyond that, tenure, years, doesn't matter. I mean, I'm also very tempted to add, I was privileged to be in the same organization that Preeti mentioned, okay? And I had joined fresh out of my MBA, and Preeti had, by the way, joined after the years of experience. After some years, it was very apparent who was adding more value and who grew faster, exactly in that setup. So sometimes, so two thoughts. One, speak to the person who can influence it instead of to yourself and a small ecosystem of people who you can crib with. That's one. My second suggestion would be actually look at it like a long-term marathon and not a quick sprint, and it'll be helpful.
My name's Hina Mehta. I have an unusual question. I really enjoyed the panel discussion this morning. Moved back from the United States about a year and a half ago. I've been a mom, and now I'm actually a grandmother, heading towards my 60th birthday next month. having come back to India, I feel I can contribute and get back into the workforce here with all the years of experience that I have as a professional. But I'm actually facing an age barrier. So wherever I go and talk to corporates, contacts, the first thing that comes up is, ooh, you're going to be 60. That's the retirement age in India, in some companies. So how do I cope with that? What do I say? How can I offer my skills, my talent, my ability, and my desire to get back into the workforce?
So consulting, retainership, we hire experienced people all the time. So those are organization policies and you need them. Otherwise, for the population we have in India, we'll never give opportunities to the younger folks to ever grow. But that doesn't stop anybody from working, and we all need a lot of experienced help. So there are other employment contracts in that space. So do write to us. I think we have a stall right outside Aditya Birla Group. We'll be more than happy to look at it.
Thank you so much for keeping those questions coming. They're all extremely valid questions. We have time for one last question if anybody has.
Hi, good morning. I first would like to thank you for the wonderful insights and the really difficult conversations made so smooth today. So, while the different topics were being spoken of, there was one point which you mentioned, which was making choiceful decisions and, not shying away when you go and meet your employers and being very explicit in what exactly, doing your homework well. But I think when I say to think of it, I actually get the fear of whether I will be perceived in the right way if I actually voice out that, this is what I'm looking at. And, how do you deal with that? Because being upfront can be taken in the wrong way. So you're already coming after a break and you're being so vocal about the choice. So first priority is to get to work. Before that, you're giving your what do you say? You're already trying to put a lot of filters to it. So how it will be perceived, and should that be a right way, or should we really quote it well so that it's more of a? So that was the question.
I think it's like marriage. When you're meeting people, you have to decide you want to be upfront or you want to discover later and figure out you're making a mistake in that space.
Good analysis.
We can't build on that one.
I mean, use your experience, the kind of maturity, the polish you have in dealing with on an everyday basis on so many issues, school, neighbors, you have the experience. It's just a new situation. So just think about how to use it in that space. So have the confidence, believe you're adding value, and you have to find the right match. Okay. And of course, the right match need not be the first match.
Thank you.
Wrap up? Okay. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for some very interesting questions and for being open and honest when you asked your questions. And thank you all for sharing. I hope this was useful for everybody. We've discussed some very interesting topics about recruiting and society and work-life balance. So hopefully we can all have a great Saturday and lots to think about. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.